What's up guys, I have another pen review for you today, and today I'm going to be reviewing the Edison Collier in antique marble. This is the packaging that it comes in, and as you can see there, Edison Pen Company, Collier, antique marble in a fine nib. The pen comes in a pretty nice, decent leatherette case. It would be like a nice pen case for like if you were giving it away as a gift or something. I don't necessarily use the pen boxes or cases that pens usually come in. I just keep it in my own leather folio with my other pens. But you know, if you're giving it away as a gift or something, it is a nice package. When you open it up, you see the pen is there. You get a pen. It also comes with a standard international converter and this kind of bookmark style thing for Edison Pen Company with a Brian's name there written. Just close that up, put that to the side. Now, the main reason why I got this pen, to be honest, is because of the looks. Excuse me. I was never really a huge fan of Edison pens. I know they're made in the United States. They're made in like a small shop. I believe Brian has a hand in making every single one of the pens. But it's just for what you're getting for the money, it's kind of expensive. Now, Brian does make two separate lines. One he has is the production line, and that's basically set pens that he has his distributor sell, and that he doesn't sell himself, and those are cheaper, or rather not as expensive as his other line, which is the signature line. And the signature lines, that's kind of where you get to customize the pen in a variety of different ways, whether you want it to be just a plain a converter filled pen or an eyedropper pen, or if you want some of his other more specialty style filling mechanisms. You can also choose the material that the pen is made out of and the color and everything. Those pens tend to be more expensive. I believe they start around $200, and then depending on the level of customization and what kind of filling mechanism you want, the price goes up from there. And that's with the steel nib. Obviously, if you want to get a gold nib on the pen, it'll cost more. The production line, basically it's still made in the United States in his shop. There are set designs, and I think it goes through the same process as his other pens. They're made in small batches, but the only difference is with the production line, you can't choose anything other than like the type of nib that you want. Now, the production line, I believe all the pens go for $150 with a steel nib, and then if you want to go ahead and get an 18K nib, gold nib, I believe the price is $275. So, it's kind of a high price for a pen you're getting, especially when you consider, other pens like Pilots or even like the Lamy 2000. You're around the same range, $160, $150, but you're getting a 14 karat gold nib, versus with this, it's just a steel nib. Now, there's nothing wrong with steel nibs, and if the nib is tuned properly, then they'll write just as well as any gold nib you can get. But, when I was trying to decide what to spend my money on, this was much lower on the priority list, so to speak. I did end up getting one because I saw pictures of this pen, and it is basically a really gorgeous color. Like, that's the main reason why I got this pen, because it looks amazing. I didn't care how the nib was out of box. When I bought this pen, it was when I started dabbling in pen nib tuning. So, if the nib wrote terribly, I would just fix it myself. That's also why I went with the steel nib option instead of the gold nib option. But I had saw a review on it on Fountain Pen Networks, and I believe it was one of the first Colliers that Brian made out of this antique marble acrylic, and it just looked super gorgeous. Now here, you might not, the coloration changes a little bit. You can kind of see some pearlescence in it. It's basically layers of amber acrylic with layers of black acrylic mixed into it, and it just looks really amazing. Like, the camera and photography just doesn't really do it justice compared to what you see in real life. Now, when I first saw the first pens made out of this antique marble acrylic, what really got to me was that it felt a lot darker and more reddish of amber color than this. This is a little lighter. I still think it's a gorgeous pen, but it's just not what I had seen in that review that really turned me on to this pen. But, you know, I still have no regrets buying it. It is a very large pen, as you can see here. You know, I believe it's actually larger than a Montblanc 149. I have a Pelikan M600 here handy, and you can see it's a lot longer than the M600, and it's also quite a bit thicker than the M600. So, it's a big pen. It's screw-on cap. Like I said, it's made out of acrylic. I did notice that there is no inner cap. There is no inner lining, inner cone in the cap to prevent the nib from drying out. But at the same time, I haven't really noticed that the nib and feed will dry out when it's capped for an extended period of time. I feel like, you know, when you screw this in, it actually provides a good enough seal where the pen won't dry out, and you don't necessarily need an inner cap. One thing that I do wish was better was the finish on the inside of the pen. You'll definitely not be able to make it out in the video, but on the inside of the cap as well as the inside of the pen body, you kind of see milling marks on the acrylic, and it wasn't really cleaned out very well. You know, I kind of wish that maybe the inside was as polished as the outside. I mean, I guess it doesn't necessarily have to be as polished as the outside, but just cleaned up a bit more would have been nice, but not a huge deal, you know. Here I have, let's see, here. You know, I have a Schaefer Balance 2. This is a modern 90s era Schaefer Balance that's cartridge converter filled, as you can see here. And this is also made out of acrylic, more of like a flake acrylic versus this, which is a layered acrylic. And on the inside, while it's not obviously as polished and coated as the outside, it is very cleanly finished inside. You know, they probably went in there with like some sort of steel brush and really spun out any of the machining burrs of the acrylic. You know, and the Edison pen does not do that. Not a huge concern. You know, you don't really look inside the pen that much, but it's just something I've really kind of noticed. Like I said, the pen comes, I got this pen in a steel nib. As you can see there, it's a fine. The original pen actually comes with this two-tone nib. This is actually no longer a fine nib. I actually kind of ground it to an extra fine. I was trying to work towards grinding it to an extra fine, but I didn't quite make it without having the pen be too scratchy. Now, the nice thing about Edison pens is that they use pretty standard off-the-shelf nib units from Jowo, and I believe this is the number 6 size. So you can easily buy an extra nib unit for $25. The gold nib unit, 18 karat gold nib unit, is $150. So, you know, you do have options with this pen. You know, if you want to tune it yourself and you end up screwing it up or whatever, you could always just invest the $25 and buy another nib unit to replace it. With this one, actually, when I got the nib, you know, I believe Brian supposedly, at least with his signature line, he hand inspects and tunes all the pens before they leave his shop. I'm not sure if that's the case with the production line, but with this pen, it did write scratchy, and, you know, out of box, I felt that the polish on the tipping wasn't that great, and the tines were also misaligned. So, you know, I straightened that out. I tried polishing a little bit, but it was just it happened to be when I first got my micro mesh, and I went a little too crazy with it and kind of brought the tipping to more like a medium than a fine. And then at that point, I decided, you know what, I'm just gonna try and grind it myself. You know, it was the first pen that I really did an actual grind on, and I just went towards extra fine. I thought it would be funny to have like my biggest pen have the smallest nib tipping size. Didn't work out. You know, I got it to extra fine, and now it writes with just a hint of feedback with a very light hand. If I go any narrower of line width, then it becomes too scratchy for my personal taste. But that's just me. I also ended up getting a separate nib unit. You know, like I said, you can get these nib units, the steel nib units, for $25. This actually happens to be a Richard Binder ground nib unit. This is a 0.7 millimeter cursive italic nib. You can see here he actually starts off with a medium Edison nib. This happens to be the single tone steel nib. And I mean, in all honesty, I'm not overly impressed by this nib grind. I know a lot of people, they love the work that Richard Binder does. Unfortunately, this is the first Binder nib that I actually got. Originally, I had actually planned on buying the Collier from him, but at the time when I bought it, he was away for the Ohio Pen Show, and I kind of want the instant gratification at the time, so I didn't really want for him to... I didn't want to wait for him to get back from the pen show in order to order this pen and get it. So I went ahead and just ordered it from a different online retailer. But I did end up getting this nib. Honestly, I'm not overly impressed with the nib. The way that it's ground, basically there's no tipping material left on it. It's not going to focus. Come on. Come on. You can do it. Focus. There we go. You see it's kind of the way it's ground. It does have great line variation. I do feel it's a little too sharp for me to be a cursive italic. But that may also be because I kind of prefer stub nibs more than like a really sharp italic or even a cursive italic nib. And it did have a lot of scratchiness and feedback out of the box. Oh, camera's not focused. So, if you were to buy just the nib unit from Binder with a specialty grind, it would be around a $65 nib unit, not including shipping, because you would have to pay for the $25 for the actual nib unit and then pay an additional $40 for the grind itself. Not overly impressed. I'm still kind of midway through working this to try and smooth it out without losing too much of the line variation and the sharpness of the italic grind. But it's a work in process. I've been working on it slowly. What else is there about this pen? Like I said, it's a big pen. One thing I don't like is the way that the section is shaped. You can see here it's actually quite a distinct curvature inwards, and it makes the section grip really small. I feel like the width where your fingers are actually holding the pen is actually narrower than something like the M600, where if you were to look at the grip section on the M600, you can see that it's more straight with the come on, focus. You can see that it doesn't curve in as much. It's more in line with the rest of the pen barrel. And I do kind of wish that was the case with the Collier, just because, I can hold it that way, but what happens is when I try and hold it in a tripod grip, at this section here, it makes my writing angle a little higher than what it normally is. Normally my writing angle is quite low, like here. You can see here it actually brings it up quite a few degrees. But because of the way the threads are cut on the body of the pen, they're not sharp at all. You don't really feel them if you hold it in this section here. So, I can actually hold the pen a little further up to get a much lower pen angle compared to the paper. So, not a big deal. I mean, honestly, I would have preferred if this was straighter, but it doesn't really affect my writing with the way I hold the pen, so I don't find it overly concerned. I'm not overly concerned about it. But, I mean, if I hold it further up by the threads, because the threads aren't sharp, I can actually use this pen for an extended period of time comfortably. Even though it's a large pen and it's quite long, because it's so lightweight, it doesn't really tire out your hands as much as like a heavier pen that may be, more back heavy or just heavier in general. It is very lightweight. One thing to note is that this pen does not post. It's not made to post. You can kind of sit it on top, but it won't really stay there. It'll just kind of wiggle right off. I wouldn't put a lot of pressure down on it to try and post, because I think you'll probably end up cracking the lip of the cap. But yeah, I mean, honestly, this pen hasn't really converted me to be a huge Edison fan. I'll probably get more of their pens in the future, because I do feel like they do use really gorgeous materials, and the patterns that you can get from them look really nice. And this was kind of one of the pens that I got because my friend always kind of gave me grief about how all my pens were kind of look like just black and gold. They're very plain looking pens, like my M600 or even my 146. But this pen kind of led me to try and get other more pattern pens, like here I got, this Schaefer Balance 2. I actually got 2 of these, which is also in like a nice textured acrylic material, and it just looks really nice, and it just looks more unique and different than your average black and gold trim or black and platinum trim pens. So I don't think I'm going to do a writing sample, just because I've done so much work on this nib. That is just not really a fair comparison of what you're going to get from the factory. And even with this, honestly, this pen is inked up right now with Noodler's Manhattan Blue, and I don't really want to get my fingers too inky now swapping out the nib and unit. One thing to note is that, these nib units, they are just basically screw on and screw off. You can see there it's threaded on the bottom, so you would basically just kind of pinch the feed and the nib between your fingers and just screw the nib section into place of this section here. So, final thoughts on this pen. If you like the material and you want a pen that's made in the United States, that's relatively robust, and this pen is a very large pen, then get it. $150 is quite a bit of a price to pay. But I mean, in all honesty, with steel nibs, if you get it tuned properly, then they'll write as well as any gold nib that you can basically get, just because the tipping material itself is what makes contact to the paper, and if that's smooth, then the nib feel will be smooth. You just won't really get the flexibility that you may get from some 14 karat gold nibs, but it all depends on kind of what you're looking at. I do like the design, I do like the overall shape. It's large, but it's slightly tapered and rounded, so it's really comfortable in hands. It's a big pen. I was in the market for a larger pen, and I don't really want to cough up the cash for a $149 right now. So if you're looking for a well-made pen, well-made in the United States pen, something larger, if you really like this material, which, I mean, honestly, I think is really nice. Like I said, this is basically the main reason why I bought this pen, then it's worth it. You don't really see that many pen manufacturers that are still making pens in the United States in small batches. Most pen makers are just doing it in large batches by assembly line. This is still kind of somewhat handmade, with obviously some computerization involved to make batches. But it is nice to think that these actually aren't made in larger batches. They're basically made in the same kind of small batch style that Brian Gray's signature line is made in. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and thanks for